welcome today to Logical Thinking in the Workplace, Solving Problems Like a Pro. So we're going to start off, what better way to introduce this topic than with the father of logical thinking himself. Some of you may know to whom I refer. Yes, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, indeed. So we're going to just start off with a little quiz here. If you got a little piece of paper, you can number 1 to 5. And all of these questions are true, false. Okay, so just listen, and they're going to come up here, or you'll be able to read them on the screen also. So true, false, number 1. Sherlock Holmes was written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Number 2. Actors who have played Holmes, true, false, Jeremy Brett, Robert Downey Jr., Benedict Cumberbatch, and Christopher Lee. Number 3, also true, false. Sherlock never actually says elementary, my dear Watson. Number 4, true, false. Dr. Watson is Holmes' trusty companion. Number 5, true, false. Sherlock's address is 221B Boxer Street. So now let's see how you did. So number 1 is true. Number 2, true. Number 3, now this one's kind of a trick question because he says elementary and he says, my dear Watson, but it is true that he never says the two phrases together. Ha. And number 4 is also true. Dr. Watson is indeed his trusty companion. And number 5 is our only false. He lives at 221B Baker Street. All right, so this was just a really fun little way to introduce this topic to you guys. If you didn't know a thing about Sherlock Holmes, now you do. You can take that to trivia night. So what are we trying to do here today? And what are we trying to accomplish? Why are you in this class? Let's take a look at our objectives. So today we are going to learn about different types of logical thinking. We are also going to identify additional problem-solving skills. We're going to examine how logical thinking can assist us in the workplace. And we're going to wrap this all up by determining 4 ways that we can improve our logical thinking skills. And we're going to do all of this with the help of Sherlock Holmes a little bit. We're going to begin by defining the term logical thinking. Logical thinking is actually an umbrella term. It's an umbrella term for ways to reach factual, reasonable conclusions. It requires multiple skills at various points when solving problems. So, as Objective 1 explains, there are various types of logical thinking, and that's what we're going to get into next. What are those types? First, we have inference, and we're going to look at all of these in more detail on separate slides, but just for introductions. When we have an inference, we assume something new based on facts we already know. The next type of logical thinking is inductive reasoning. Here we begin with a specific observation and pattern recognition. Then we come to a general conclusion. And then we have deductive reasoning. Here you begin with a general premise and then apply it to a specific premise. So let's look at those in more detail. When it comes to inferences, this is a skill that everyone uses every day in many situations. And again, to reiterate the definition, this is when we assume something new based on facts we already know. And it's really important to keep that part in mind. Facts you already know. Also, it's very important to keep in mind that just because you may be able to come to several conclusions, that doesn't mean that any of them are accurate or correct. So let's look at an example. Fact 1, Sherlock here, he works for employee development. So there's one fact. Employee development is part of OHRM, who holds monthly meetings. So there's another fact. So we've got 2 facts. It's kind of like math, and I'm not good at math, but this is math with words, so we'll pretend I'm good at that. So if we put that together, fact 1 plus fact 2 leads us to the conclusion that Sherlock probably participates in meetings with OHRM. Because he works for employee development is part of OHRM, therefore it makes sense that he would also participate in those meetings. So that's how inferences work. keeping in mind here that the idea is to sort of gather information. You're gathering information. What can you infer from what you see and the facts that you've gathered? And that you're making reasonable conclusions based on fact one, fact two, fact three is going to lead you to infer, oh, well, this thing is probably going to be the reasonable conclusion that I'm going to come to. So the next one is inductive reasoning, and this is also referred to as bottom-up reasoning. And this is when you move from the specific to the general. So if you were to think of the image of a funnel, this is where you would start with the skinny part on the bottom and work your way up to the wide part. So let's again look at another example. Here, very specific example. Sherlock prefers to use logical thinking to solve crimes. Then you start to recognize patterns. Most detectives I've met prefer to use logical thinking to solve crimes. So let's put that in a little bit more of a real world example. Let's pretend I'm a reporter and I've been to Chicago, LA, Charlotte, Sandusky, New Orleans, Miami, and every single one of these detectives that I've met, they're all using logical thinking to solve their crimes. So I've noticed a pattern. So where does that lead me? I conclude, general conclusion, okay, it seems that all detectives prefer to use logical thinking to solve crimes. Does that mean that all of them do? No, because there might be somebody out in Springfield that's doing something totally crazy. But for the most part, based on my specific observation, based on my pattern recognition, I'm going to come to this general conclusion that probably all detectives prefer to use logical thinking to solve crimes. All right, so that's inductive reasoning, and again, also referred to as bottom up. We then have the other side of that. We have deductive reasoning, which is referred to as top-down reasoning. And this is when you begin with the general premise or an idea, and you move from one which is more from general to more specific. And again, using that imagery of the funnel, this is where you start with the wide, and you would then move down to the narrow part on the bottom. So let's look at this example. Very, very general premise. All detectives are from London. Sherlock is a detective. Therefore, Sherlock is from London. Again, it's very general, specific, leaves you with a conclusion. Does it necessarily mean that it's correct? No. Does it always mean that it's going to be accurate? No. But again, it's a way to try to reason to get to a somewhat correct answer. To have an idea of how these concepts works can be beneficial for the everyday person and for, again, figuring out how to problem solve. I had mentioned earlier that Sherlock Holmes is considered by some to be the father of logical thinking. And more accurately, he is considered to be the father of deduction. But that is even up to debate, as armchair detectives have taken to hacking apart his webpage and noting that the skill that Holmes uses more is induction rather than deduction. His own creator, Arthur Conan Doyle, has even joined in the debate and noted that Holmes actually uses both methods, induction and deduction. And so again, if this is something that piques your interest, it's a whole thing all over the internet. Dive in, go down that rabbit hole. It's kind of interesting. But this is a nice segue, and I mentioned this as an important point about these skills. They do not live in a vacuum. In order to infer, you deduce at the same time. You may infer while you are also inducing like Holmes, and use both of these strategies interchangeably to solve a problem. And while your skill set improves, you don't even really realize that you're beginning to make inferences while also recognizing patterns and coming to conclusions. It does begin to sort of happen naturally, so just keep that in mind. But also keep in mind that conclusions reached, while they may be true, there is always room for error. But now that we have learned about different types of logical thinking. Congratulations, you've completed objective 1. We are now going to move on to objective 2, which is to identify additional problem-solving skills. So the goal of logical thinking is problem solving, and there are 3 parts involved in this process. First, we need to identify why the problem is even happening. Then we brainstorm for solutions, then decide which solution to move forward with. That's the steps for problem solving right there. There's a couple other additional skills involved in all of that. So additionally to the process there, the 3-step process, is something called critical thinking. And you kind of want to have this one under your belt. It should also be noted that critical thinking is not synonymous with logical thinking, as it is sometimes confused. Critical thinking comes into play at the beginning of the problem-solving process, and it employs the analysis of using facts and evidence, as we touched on before. It's imperative that critical thinkers be objective, free of bias, and focused on accuracy. So the next one is creativity. Look at that. So along with problem-solving skill that you may not have thought of is creativity. And when you're thinking in creativity here, what it's asking you to do is think outside of the box, be innovative, come up with solutions that kind of open your mind to figure out how to connect facts, maybe in a way that you wouldn't have thought of, or in a way that's sort of unexpected. Additionally, this is the part of the story, when Sherlock Holmes, he surprises all of his mates at Scotland Yard. This is the best part, the tobacco ash and the lipstick stain and the 2 champagne glasses and the lady's handkerchief and the chimney sweeper all reveal the murderer. And you're going, how did he do that? Well, it's that ingenious creativity, so you have to get a little bit weird sometimes to figure it out. So don't be afraid of getting a little bit weird and being a little creative. And then as critical thinking comes at the beginning of the problem-solving process, later on we come to reasoning. And this is important to consider all possibilities before arriving at a conclusion. Using reasoning to compare solutions for benefits and advantages, as well as disadvantages. This is where you take stock and you find what guides you to your truth. As Holmes says, when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. So now we are ready to move on to objective 3 and examine how logical thinking can assist in the workplace. How can logical thinking help you at work? And you're going, well, what does logic have to do with my health? That's what you're thinking right now, right? Well, sometimes, as we all know, we push ourselves beyond the point of being logical. You all know what I mean. So we need to make sure that we're taking breaks, that we're eating a balanced diet, and that we're even using that good chair to sit in to take care of our backs. But deadlines, meetings, projects, phone calls, they take precedence over our good logic. And even Holmes falls victims to this frenzy, and he will shut himself away in his room for days. If you joined us for Moving to Motivate, then you learned a little bit about how being active during your workday is going to benefit you. And if we really want to talk logic, do the logical thing and use your time wisely. Here at Employee Development, we offer many classes that discuss the negative impacts of not taking breaks. And here in a few weeks, I'll discuss with you what happens when you grind to the point of burnout. But today, let's just look at how applying smart thinking to take care of yourself benefits you. In her article for Very Well Mind, Dr. Elizabeth Scott, she explains how taking a break really does benefit us. It reduces stress by interrupting the cycle. When we remove ourselves from a stressful environment, we interrupt the cycle of stress that can lead to feeling overwhelmed. Rest equals restoration, physically and mentally. So by breaking out of that cycle, again, you restore yourself to a healthier place. Clearer thinking. When you are chronically stressed, this can lead to decreased creativity, a component that we already discussed as being very necessary to problem solving. Chronic stress leads to memory problems and other issues. So again, breaking the stress cycle can lead to sharper thinking, increased creativity, and that is exactly what we need when we're trying to think logically and reasonably. And then taking a break, it increases our productivity. This will benefit you across the board. Better at work, better in your relationships, more energetic with your family, and more able to enjoy life in general. So what's the upshot? Take breaks. Take your breaks that you are given. And when you feel like you should power through, maybe reconsider. So what else is this going to do for us at work, this logical thinking? And this health stuff, right? Snacks. How does that have anything to do with logic? Well, it does, because problem solving in all of its form requires energy. So to keep our engine running, we must fuel it with good nutrition. And of course, this is one of those things, again, we all know, but sometimes we get a little bit too caught up in all of our stuff to actually do it. So remember that your logical thinking skills need you to eat well in order for your brain to make the connection between inferences, deductions, and so forth. The nutrition source from Harvard University notes the benefits of healthy snacking. Provides a boost of energy if several hours have passed between meals and your blood glucose drops. It will help you curb your appetite to prevent overeating at your next meal. It's going to provide extra nutrients when you're choosing certain foods, especially foods like fresh fruits or nuts. And it can help you maintain adequate nutrition, especially if you're maybe ill or you're maybe taking medications don't allow you to eat full meals. This one, you may not have ever thought about it before, but one last way to maintain healthy habits at work, all of which are also using logical thinking to help assist us in the workplace. Don't forget to take advantage of ergonomics. This is furniture that is designed with humans in mind. It's a whole science, and there is so much data and information on workplace ergonomics that it could be a whole lesson in and of itself. But just like eating healthy and taking breaks, think of the logical reasons why you would want to take advantage of a standing desk or natural light. Boston Tech is an ergonomic furniture company that has been in business since 1993, and they note some excellent advantages to the use of ergonomics in the workplace. Ergonomic workstations help reduce tension in your body because you can adjust the height and the positions. It reduces strain on your neck, back, your eyes, also offers better blood flow to your legs. Ergonomic workspaces are more efficient, which increases productivity as well as organization, and feeling organized and working more efficiently certainly aids in your ability to problem solve without distraction. And improved mental clarity. Because you've reduced your physical discomfort, you can now work more successfully with reduced stress, which will improve your concentration. And so now you're comfortable in your workspace. You can focus better and you can tackle those problems like a pro. And our final tip on how logical thinking can assist us in the workplace is we all know that there are a plethora of things that could go wrong in an 8-hour day. So using your general problem-solving skills are always going to help you out of a jam. Whether it's 2 employees not getting along, a jammed printer, a function in Excel not working correctly, or just too much to do at once. Simply relying on facts, evidence, reasoning, and just remembering to breathe are all going to hopefully get you straightened back out and on track. So now that we've learned about different types of logical thinking, identified various problem-solving skills, and how they can assist us in the workplace, it's time to turn to our final objective, which really brings it all together, and that is to determine 4 ways, I'm sure there are plenty more than 4, but we're going to stick with 4 for now, and how to improve logical thinking skills. So we already talked about creativity a little bit during this webinar, but what is meant by building creative habits? What if you're like me and you're terrible at art and drawing? Does that mean you just skip this step? Well, no. There are plenty of ways to be creative that don't involve pencil and paper. If you are already doing some of these things, then keep at it. That's great. Otherwise, you may want to work some of these creative habits into your routine. The co-founder of Twiz, a full-service marketing firm, recommends these practices. Play music. Make any kind of art. And the really, really amazing thing about making art and music is that it stimulates your mind and actually helps promote logical thinking. One even more nifty thing about it is that it creates the problem-solving process. It begins to start to happen naturally. The more that you challenge your mind to answer and solve problems at work, the better your overall logical thinking process becomes. Other creative hobbies include things like word games, crafting, reading, solving riddles. And you guys, again, cleaning, yes, all of those things are those kinds of ideas that help you kind of, I wouldn't say zone out, but it's just, it helps your mind be more free. At least, and that's in my opinion, helps your mind be more free. Let's take a look at what else we can do. Lucky for you, building creative habits and learning a new skill can happen at the same time. And everyone these days seems to be a little bit pressed for time, so why not expedite your process? This is another area where Sherlock is on top of his game. As when he doesn't have a case, he is constantly dabbling in some hobby, old and new. He may take up sharpening his chess game. I do recommend learning crochet or play a new instrument because this activates your logical thinking skills and it helps you develop your new skill. Remember that you have to be patient. Time and effort are all required when you're learning something new and trying to solve a problem. So be kind to yourself. All right, when we think about breaking it down, this one can be difficult for big picture thinkers. If you're one of those big picture thinkers, this one can be a little bit hard. But remember, you do not have to deal with the whole wall. You can just deal with some of the bricks. Take that hammer, bust it up into smaller, more manageable pieces, and focus on one thing at a time. What do we mean by breaking it down? Practicing that. Well, you want to break down individual facts and then connect them to reasonable conclusions. Consider a task that you must do, something you really have to do every single day in your life. I'm going to show you an example and then we'll talk about other ones. But we'll just simple example, getting ready for work. And if you're like me, some days getting ready for work, you feel like a 7-year-old. It can be a difficult task, but when you break it down, brush my teeth, take a shower, get dressed, make coffee, feed the cat, go to work, it becomes easier when it's not such a big thing. So this practice can help you develop a habit of zooming in on smaller components of bigger issues. If it's something that you're not used to doing, again, remember, like all things, it just takes time to get good at. So yeah, again, this is an excellent way to help you kind of keep track of what's going on and again, not get overwhelmed. And just to give you a little bit more advice from Mr. Sherlock, he has what he calls a memory palace. And in it, he keeps many, many facts and details, pieces, if you will, to draw on and make connections to come to reasonable conclusions. So if you don't have a memory palace or some sort of filing system in your brain, get one. And our last tip, here we are, on how to improve your logical thinking skills is to simply do what Sherlock does best, and that is observe others. So what does that mean? That means pay attention to how other people tackle problems and the strategies that they use. Take note of how they are successful in their work, their meetings, group projects, and on other problems that arise. And be curious. Ask people about the specific choices they make. How did they get to that place? Did it work? Did it not work? Why? Why not? And hopefully most of us have a friend at work or a buddy outside of work that is willing to share these experiences with us. Take what you learn and observe and file it away in your memory palace. So before we finish for the day, let's take one final look over our course objectives so we can be sure that we covered everything. In objective 1, we learned about the different types of logical thinking. In objective 2, we identified additional problem-solving skills. In objective 3, we examined how logical thinking can assist in the workplace. In objective 4, we determined, that's the one we just finished, 4 ways to improve logical thinking skills. And while you don't need a deer stalker, a pipe, and a magnifying glass to accomplish logical thinking, remember that thinking like Sherlock Holmes or Monk can help you reason out most problems and challenges you will face in your everyday life. Thank you kindly for your patience, your participation, everything. Thank you, folks. I appreciate you so much.